Hey, honors kids, this is Mr. Rancor, and I wanted to take a minute and go through these headphones. I do realize that you may not have all written down, so as I'm going through and we're highlighting some things, make sure that you get them written down as well. So you might have to hit pause, and that's okay a few times, but get them down, and I also want you to highlight some key phrases, okay? So first, for the scientific method, what I need you to make sure you realize that you remember is that this is a way of researching done by a scientist. Yeah? And that includes identifying the problem, formulating a hypothesis, gathering data, performing a testing experiment, and then explaining if your hypothesis is correct. But just for the sake of this class and sake for studying, if somebody were to ask you, what term do you use when we're referring to a way of researching done by scientists, you just know that's the scientific method. An experiment is an organized procedure. Yes, it has very specific steps. You follow those steps in order. So that's where we get that term organized from. I would highly encourage you, meaning I'm telling you, to circle that word organized. Okay. When you start to write your procedures for your software, you'll need to make sure that you list them in numerical order. Step one, step two, so on and so forth. Okay. Your hypothesis is your if then statement. It is your prediction, not blind prediction, but it is your prediction um, about what you think will happen in the experiment based off past results or based off evidence already gathered from previous experiments. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when I come back on Thursday. The independent variable is the factor that is deliberately changed. And I can't emphasize this word. I'm going to put a star by it enough. The factor that is changed. So, for instance, if I wanted to run an experiment to test to see if the amount of sunlight affects the way a plant grows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up like four different pots, keep the same type of soil, keep the same type of plant, keep the same amount of water, right? But the only thing I'm going to change is the amount of sunlight that each one of those plants gets. Yes. And that's what we call the independent variable. So in that case, in that scenario, the independent variable would be the amount of sunlight. The dependent variable, now I think this is confusing, but I just need you to know this and recognize this term because it's pretty standard. The dependent variable is literally what we're measuring. And if you want to write this underneath dependent variable, what we're measuring, do so. It's the thing that changes because we changed the independent variable, really. And I wouldn't highlight anything right there. I would just highlight this. It's what we measure. Data obviously is facts, figures, and other evidence. And there's different types of data. We'll talk about that in just a second on the backside. Okay, very simple, easy definition. Again, if I'm going too fast, please make sure that you pause and get these words down written and then down written, these words written down. Okay, and then highlight what you need to highlight. Okay, on back. A model, model, is a visual or mathematical representation. Let me try that real quick. A visual or mathematical representation. This usually involves like a picture with words. When we get into physics, we'll talk a lot about models. We'll draw lots of models. I want to come back to these two in just a second, accuracy and precision. So you can either write them down now, but I'm not going to discuss them. I want to do that very, very last. What I really want to talk about is on this backside you wrote data. I want to talk about two types of data real quick. So there's quantitative data, and I know one class I think we got this done, and the other one I'm not quite sure. So write that in quantitative data. Data is quantitative data is data that contains numbers. So like anytime you record something that's like 3 meters long, has a mass of 7 grams, or it takes 9 seconds, that's all quantitative data. And I want you to underline this part right here that this kind of prefix, which is quantity. Quantity means amount of the numbers. Data that's descriptive or data that contains adjectives. Like if I'm describing how something is red, or that it's cloudy, or that it's long, or that it fizzes, or it smokes, or it's heavy. Okay, that's called qualitative data. Quality comes from that word. Okay, qualitative data. And then the last one, before I talk about those other two, are is the word observation or observations, and that's just obtaining information using the five senses. When we think of observing something, we think of just using our eyes. And in science, it's all about using one or more of the five senses that we have. Okay. So get this highlighted, get these written down, and when you're done with this, all I want you to do is fold this back up, okay, and put this into your notebook. Cool?